This clip is a sneak peek from one of our Patterns Plus video series. If you'd like to see the full video and more videos like it, please consider subscribing via the link in the description. Patterns Plus gives access to exciting new video series we are working on. These include special scholarly interviews on various biblical archaeology topics and evidences. Your subscription goes towards supporting our work on new Patterns of Evidence films and other Bible-affirming projects that help preserve and pass on the historical credibility of the Bible. Thank you so much for your support, and please consider coming alongside us in this important mission. Not every view expressed by scholars contributing to podcast content necessarily reflects the views of Patterns of Evidence. We include perspectives from various sides of debates on biblical matters so that our audience can become familiar with the different arguments involved. Keep thinking.
Is there anything else in the physical evidence that you want to share? Did they find any skeletal remains of people that were fried, or were they completely gone?
Well, they're not skeletons. They're fragments of people that were literally ripped apart, blown apart. The airburst event literally pulverizes and just churns everything. And the resultant destruction layer at el-Hammam for the Middle Bronze II period of time of Abraham is 1 meter to 1.5 meters thick. It's hugely thick. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. In fact, some scholars have looked at it and said, wow, this is like Pompeii, you know? It came from a direction. All the pottery, all the debris is moving from a southwest to a northeast direction. Everything is being smashed and pulverized. el-Hammam is a massively fortified city. It was the first fortified city in the southern Levant in the Middle Bronze Age style. It's massive. It has 62 acres inside the city wall. It has another 300 acres of town around it. It has temples. It has a huge gateway system, which is a pillared gateway system in the Minoan style. It's got a fabulous palace. The footprint of the el-Hammam palace in the day of Abraham is about the same footprint as the White House. It's in fact a little bit bigger. And so massive temple, massive buildings, massive fortifications, and it was a hugely wealthy city. We have no evidences in the entire 5,000-year history of the site that it was ever taken militarily. It was a strong city, it was a rich city, and nobody ever took it by force. It did get knocked down twice by earthquakes, but they rebuilt instantly. But that last one, that Middle Bronze Age destruction, nobody lived in that entire region for the next 700 years. It's significant because when you have an event like this that destroys the soil, kills everything, people, animals, soil, plants, it takes about 700 to 800 years in an arid climate area like this for the soils to naturally recoup so that agriculture could start once again. So agriculture ramped up again about 700 years later, about 1000 BC, in the time of King David and Solomon, where they began to grow barley again. But in that intervening time, nobody lives there. There are no settlements in that area for 700 years because nobody can live there. It's been denuded of its agricultural capability.
So if we go back to why you have chosen this location, obviously I think the one criticism that I had heard was that some people felt that it was destroyed later in time.
It was destroyed in 1700 BC. The radiocarbon dates focus on 1700 BC plus minus 50. Well, of course, those who kind of take the old, traditional Usher chronology put Abraham in the 21st century BC.
He's up 300 years earlier in time, is what you're saying.
Well, that's when they put him about 300 years earlier. But here's the problem. None of the towns and none of the culture and nothing in the Abraham story exists in that period of time. You don't have a Jerusalem. You don't have Hebron. You don't have any place that Abraham ever went, or any of the other patriarchs for that matter. So the patriarchal period, strictly historically, archaeologically, climatologically, belongs to the period between 1800 and 1600 BC.
When we think about people like Edward Robinson, and William Albright. Was it that they didn't have us enough information about some of this at their time? Because they started to shift the idea in the South.
Robinson existed in a pre-scientific era. He knew nothing. By the way, he's one of a few dozen explorer scholars who studied that whole region back in the 19th century. Here's the problem with Robinson. He was there in the land for a couple of months. He discovered Robinson's Arch. He discovered a few other things, but he was not a geologist. He was not an archaeologist. He was not even a really good geographer. And so he looks at the southern end of the Dead Sea and he etiologically decides that, wow, this looks like a place that God would have destroyed. This must be the area of the cities of the plain. Well, he was just flat out wrong about that. He had no concept of archaeology, no concept of the geology, no concept of anything like that. And by the way, check it out. Every other explorer scholar of that era who used the Bible to identify the location of sites located Sodom north and east of the Dead Sea. Conder, Thompson, Merrill, all these guys. And they went, in fact, one night, Thompson and Conder were camping on top of Tal el-Hammam, and they describe it and they say, which of these tells, this or the other tells that we can see from here is Sodom? We don't know, but it must be one of these because this is where the Bible takes us to the Kikar of the Jordan, north and east of the Dead Sea. That's what they all decided. Robinson was the outlier who really didn't know what he was talking about. And here's the problem. W.F. Albright picked up on Robinson. But W.F. Albright was not a dumb guy. He was a genius. And he knew the archaeology. Albright puts Abraham between 1800 and 1600 BC because he knows the archaeology of the Cisjordan highlands like Jerusalem. He never, ever suggested that Babadra or any of those sites could be Sodom and Gomorrah. So where did Albright put it? Albright put the cities of the plain underneath the shallow waters at the south end of the Dead Sea. Maybe when the cities were destroyed, there was a great earthquake and the land sank and the waters of the Dead Sea flooded over them. Said someday maybe we'll be able to check it out. Well, guess what? In the last 50 years, the Dead Sea is dried up in the southern area. And the only reason there's any water down there now is because it's artificially pumped into the evaporative pan so they can mine out the minerals. Archaeologists ran down there. As soon as the Dead Sea was dry at the southern basin, they went down there. There's not so much as a sherd. And by the way, geologically, geographically, it's a stupid place to build a village or a town because every time it rains, that area will flood because of the wadis that come in around it. And so Albright was just wrong. J. Ernest Wright sort of propagated that myth of Albright that it was under the waters at the south end of the Dead Sea. It's just not true. In fact, the Bible doesn't put Sodom south of the Dead Sea. It puts it northeast of the Dead Sea, east of Bethel and Ai. It's as simple as that. The southern area has no possible sites from the time of Abraham. It doesn't have any intermediate Bronze Age sites. It doesn't have any Middle Bronze 1 sites. It doesn't have any Middle Bronze 2 sites. So there is nothing down there after 2500 BC.
Well, let's say when Ron Wyatt was out looking.
Don't even mention Ron Wyatt to me because Ron Wyatt was a charlatan. He's a scammer. He's not an archaeologist. I confronted him to the face when he did a public lecture here in Albuquerque. And what was funny to watch is everybody, tried to get a refund at the book table afterwards. Nothing that Ron Wyatt ever said about the Bible and archaeology is true. Scam 100%.
At that location, there wasn't any villages there even, or a city, right? It's just sulfur balls that they were looking for.
Yeah, Ron Wyatt put Sodom in those very strange little marl formations below Masada. I always said about Ron Wyatt, I'm glad he didn't go to Bryce Canyon or some of these places where there's all these spires and natural, wonderful geology, because he would have seen the New York skyline. No, he made it up. It was totally ludicrous. These are natural geological deposits. The marl deposits he interpreted as the burned out buildings of Sodom is just absolute nonsense. It's worth in myth and legend. And it's just silly, stupid stuff that I can't believe anybody would would accept. But of course, people are ignorant and gullible, and that's what he wrote on.
And so the other site across the way, which is the Southern Valley site, one of the other interviews is going to be with Titus Kennedy. I think he's going to start digging that site again.
Those are early Bronze Age sites, and they all went down at the end of the early Bronze III period. Now, Baba Dra did have a little extramural intermediate Bronze Age site, EB4 we call it, but it wasn't walled, and it was probably seasonal. And there wasn't another city. There aren't multiple cities down there. There are two. Actually, Numira's can't even really be classed as a city. It's more of a garrison. And but Baba Dra's, it's 10 acres. It's okay, but you could fit 6 Baba Dras inside the wall of Tal Hammam. And Baba Dra was always a marginal desert site. And all the climate had to do was make a slight shift and they'd be out of business. Here's the thing. Tal Hammam was continuously occupied, well watered. They have water inside the city, hot and cold water, a hot spring and a cold spring, and springs all around, and the Jordan River. Tal Hammam was the largest continuously occupied city in the entire southern Levant, and it has multiple satellites around it, cities. Within 5 kilometers, you have 14 archaeological sites.
This clip is a sneak peek from one of our Patterns Plus video series. If you'd like to see the full video and more videos like it, please consider subscribing via the link in the description. Patterns Plus gives access to exciting new video series we are working on. These include special scholarly interviews on various biblical archaeology topics and evidences. Your subscription goes towards supporting our work on new Patterns of Evidence films and other Bible-affirming projects that help preserve and pass on the historical credibility of the Bible. Thank you so much for your support, and please consider coming alongside us in this important mission.